Rachel Martinez stepped off the transport truck at Fort Kellen with her worn duffel bag and a rifle case that had seen better days. The Colorado mountain air cut through her jacket as she surveyed the concrete fortress carved into the granite. Cliffs. This was it. Sniper school, the most elite marksmanship program in the military. The other recruits moved with swagger, their brand new tactical gear gleaming in the morning sun. Rachel watched them compare their high-tech rifles, each one worth more than her car back home. Her own weapon, a vintage bolt-action her grandfather had carried in Vietnam, felt suddenly inadequate in her canvas case. "Who brings a museum piece?" "To sniper school," muttered Tyler Callahan, a cocky recruit from Texas whose voice carried across the formation. His comment drew snickers from the group. "Hey, Grandma, you sure you're in the right place?" Rachel didn't respond. She'd learned long ago that silence was often the strongest reply. Instead, she pulled out her leather-bound notebook, pages thick with hand-drawn wind charts and ballistic calculations she'd been perfecting for years. While others boasted about their equipment, she quietly studied the range flag snapping in. The mountain wind. Captain Davis, the lead instructor, barely glanced at her during roll call. When he reached her name, he paused as if surprised to find it there. "Martinez." "Support staff transfer?" he asked, consulting his clipboard with a frown. "No, sir, sniper candidate," Rachel replied firmly. Davis looked her up and down, taking in her faded fatigues, worn boots, and the obvious age difference between her gear and everyone else's. "Right," he said, his tone suggesting otherwise. "We'll see." The first day's briefing made one thing clear. Speed was everything at Fort Kellen. Fast acquisition, fast shots, fast kills. The school's motto was painted on the barracks wall. First shot, fast shot, last shot. Everything Rachel had learned about precision and patience seemed suddenly outdated. During equipment inspection, Sergeant Reynolds, the rangemaster, stopped at Rachel's rifle. He lifted it from her case like it might fall apart in his hands. "This thing even still." "Fire?" he asked, earning more laughter from the watching recruits. "Yes, sir. Maintained it myself for 15 years. 15 years? Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "How old are you, Martinez?" 34, sir." The silence that followed was telling. Most recruits were fresh out of basic training, barely 20 years old. Rachel had spent over a decade in supply and logistics, earning her spot here through exceptional scores on the marksmanship qualification tests. But looking around at the faces staring at her, she realized her experience might not matter as much as she'd hoped. That evening, as she arranged her gear in the barracks, Rachel overheard Tyler talking to his bunkmates. $10, says the male. "Clark washes out by Friday," he said. "She's probably here because someone lost paperwork and she got assigned by mistake." The nickname stuck immediately, Male Clark. By the end of the week, even some of the instructors were using it. Rachel endured it all in silence, focusing instead on studying the range conditions and preparing for her first live fire test. She had no way of knowing that in just a few weeks, that same silence would be the difference between life and death for a visiting general, and that the outdated rifle they all mocked would prove that sometimes old school beats new school when it matters most. But first, she had to survive being the misfit in boots that everyone had already written off. Too slow to matter. The qualification range stretched out before them like a battlefield. 12 shooting lanes, each with targets at varying distances up to 800 yards. The mountain wind whipped across the range, making the flags dance frantically. Rachel felt the familiar calm settle over her as she studied the conditions. This was where she belonged. "Shooters, you have 60 seconds per target," Captain Davis announced through the loudspeaker. "Speed and accuracy, people, both or neither." Rachel loaded her bolt-action rifle, feeling the smooth action that she knew better than her own heartbeat. Around her, the other recruits chambered rounds in their semi-automatic platforms. The difference in rate of fire would be significant, but Rachel had always believed in making every shot count. The whistle blew. Tyler Callahan was 3 targets ahead of her within the first minute, his rifle barking rapidly as he engaged targets at different ranges. Rachel worked methodically, taking time to read the wind, adjust for each distance, and deliver precision shots. Her bullets found their marks with surgical accuracy, dead center every time. But when the final whistle blew, she was still engaging. Her last target. "Time!" Davis called out. "Cease fire!" Rachel's final shot was perfect, a bullseye at 700 yards that would have impressed any civilian shooter. But she was 2 targets short of completion. The time limit had beaten her. During scoring, Sergeant Reynolds walked the line checking targets. When he reached Rachel's lane, he paused. Her completed shots were flawless, tighter groupings than anyone else on the range, but rules were rules. "Martinez," he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Outstanding accuracy, but you failed to complete the course of fire. That's a failure." Tyler's targets showed several shots in the scoring. Rings, but with some wild misses and 1 complete failure to engage. His time, however, was well within limits. Callahan, passing score, good speed management. As they walked back to the barracks, Rachel heard the whispers start. "Told you she couldn't hack it. Maybe they'll send her back to stamping mail. Should have brought a faster gun, Grandma." That evening, she found a note on her bunk. It was her reassignment orders. Effective immediately, she was being transferred to Armory support. No retrial, no second chance. Just a clinical dismissal typed on official letterhead. Rachel sat on her bunk, staring at the orders. 15 years of perfect marksmanship scores, countless hours of practice, a lifetime dream, ended because she was 3 seconds too slow on an arbitrary timeline. "Hey, don't look so down," Tyler said, appearing at her bunk with a mock sympathetic grin. "At least now you can clean our rifles properly. Make sure you don't scratch my scope when you're polishing it." The laughter from his buddies stung, but Rachel folded the orders quietly and placed them in her notebook. She'd report to the Armory tomorrow as ordered, but something inside her had hardened. She might not be fast enough for their tests, but she knew something they didn't. Speed meant nothing if you missed the only shot that mattered. In the margins of her notebook, she wrote a single line: precision over speed, always. The next morning, she reported to Master Sergeant Williams in the Armory. He was a gruff man in his 50s who'd been maintaining weapons longer than most of the recruits.
"Had been alive? So you're the sniper washout," Williams said, not unkindly.
"Heard you shoot straight, just too slow for the young bucks." "Yes, sir." Williams studied her for a moment. "Well, Martinez, maybe you'll learn something useful here. These fancy rifles they're carrying need constant maintenance, and between you and,
me," he lowered his voice. "Half these kids couldn't hit a barn door if it was painted bright red and standing still." Rachel managed a small smile.
It was the first time anyone at Fort Kellen had suggested she might have value. As she began learning the intricacies of rifle maintenance and ballistics calibration, Rachel didn't know that her new position would give her access to something invaluable: the detailed maintenance records of every rifle on base, including the classified performance data that would soon become very important indeed. The janitor's revenge. 3 weeks into her Armory assignment, Rachel had settled into an invisible routine. She arrived before dawn, cleaned and calibrated rifles, and endured the daily stream of jokes from the sniper candidates who dropped off their weapons for maintenance. "How's the cleaning lady today?" Tyler would ask whenever he came in, always, with his crew of followers. Make sure my scope is crystal clear. I've got a reputation to maintain. Rachel would nod silently and take his rifle, often finding it poorly maintained and incorrectly zeroed. She'd fix the problems without comment, returning a weapon that shot better than when Tyler had first received it. He never noticed the improvements, always assuming his good scores were due to his natural talent. But Rachel noticed everything. She kept detailed records in her notebook, not just win data and ballistic calculations, but performance data on every rifle that came through the armory. Tyler's rifle, she noted, had a slight trigger issue that made his shots pull left under pressure. Another recruit's scope had a tracking problem that threw off long-range shots. She fixed these issues quietly, never mentioning them to the owners. The real revelation came when Master Sergeant Williams showed her the classified performance data from the range computers. "Don't let this leave the armory," Williams said, pulling up the detailed shooting analysis on his secure terminal. "But look at these patterns." Rachel studied the data with growing understanding. The computer tracked not just hit or miss, but precision, consistency, and performance under stress. What she saw made her jaw clench. Tyler Callahan, the golden boy of the sniper program, had serious accuracy problems that his speed masked. Under stress simulation, his groups opened up significantly. Several other top-ranked candidates showed similar issues. They could shoot fast, but when precision mattered most, they faltered. "Sir," Rachel said carefully, "some of these candidates might not be ready for real-world deployment." Williams nodded grimly. "I've been trying to tell the instructors that for months. But speed sells, Martinez. The brass loves fast times and quick kills. They don't want to hear about precision under pressure." That evening, Rachel made a decision that would change everything. Using her access to the range computers and maintenance records, she began compiling a detailed analysis of each candidate's true capabilities. She worked late into the night, cross-referencing ammunition performance, rifle condition, and shooting data. What she discovered was disturbing. The school's emphasis on speed was graduating shooters who couldn't perform when it mattered most. Tyler and several others were heading for advanced training, despite having significant accuracy problems that would manifest in real combat situations. Rachel documented everything meticulously, preparing a report that she planned to submit through proper channels. But she also knew that challenging the program's core philosophy would likely end her military career. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. Captain Davis visited the armory personally, something that had never happened before. "Martinez," he said, his tone unusually serious, "I need to ask you about some unusual computer access in the range systems." Rachel's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "Sir, I've been maintaining rifles and checking performance data as part of my duties. That's not what I'm talking about." Davis moved closer. "Someone has been accessing classified training records and candidate performance data. That's above your clearance level." Williams stepped forward. "Captain, I authorized Martinez to access that data for maintenance purposes. If there's a problem, the problem," Davis interrupted, "is that someone is compiling unauthorized reports on candidate performance, reports that could be seen as undermining the program." Rachel realized her careful documentation had been discovered, but instead of backing down, she made a choice that surprised everyone, including herself. "Sir, if you've seen my reports, then you know what I found. Some of these candidates aren't ready for deployment. The data proves it. The silence in the armory was deafening." Davis stared at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. "Martinez, you're a support staff member who washed out of sniper training. What makes you think you're qualified to evaluate candidates who passed?" "Because I've been fixing their rifles for weeks, sir. and I've seen what happens when precision really matters. It was the first time Rachel had directly challenged the system, and she could see the anger building in Davis's face. But she also saw something else, uncertainty. Deep down, he knew she might be right. "You're walking a dangerous line, Martinez," Davis said finally. "I suggest you focus on your assigned duties and stop playing instructor." After he left, Williams put a hand on Rachel's shoulder. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But be careful. Davis doesn't like being challenged, especially by someone the program already rejected." Rachel nodded, but her resolve had only strengthened. She'd spent too many years being dismissed and overlooked. If nobody else would speak up for precision and real combat readiness, then she would, regardless of the consequences. What she didn't know was that her confrontation with Davis had been overheard by someone who would soon play a crucial role in everything that followed. Gathering storm. The atmosphere at Fort Kellen shifted after Rachel's confrontation with Captain Davis. Word spread quickly through the small base that the Armory janitor had challenged the sniper program's methods. Most of the recruits found it hilarious, the washout critiquing the candidates who'd succeeded where she'd failed. Tyler Callahan made sure everyone heard his take. "Can you believe it? Mail clerk thinks she knows better than the instructors. Next thing you know, the cook will be giving tactical advice," but not everyone was laughing. Colonel Sarah Chen, the base commander, had been quietly reviewing Rachel's unauthorized reports. What she found troubled her deeply. "Williams," she said, summoning the Master Sergeant to her office, "I need to understand these performance analyses your armorer compiled. Are these numbers accurate?" Williams shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, ma'am. Martinez has access to all the rifle performance data, and her analysis is thorough. She's identified some significant issues with candidate readiness, Colonel." Chen studied the reports spread across her desk. "According to this, several of our top-ranked candidates show serious accuracy degradation under stress conditions. Callahan's precision drops by 40% in simulated combat scenarios." "That's correct, ma'am. Then why are they still in the program?" Williams hesitated. "Ma'am, that's above my pay grade, but Martinez has been trying to raise these concerns through proper channels." That afternoon, Colonel Chen made an unusual request. She wanted to observe Rachel's work in the Armory personally. When she arrived, she found Rachel meticulously calibrating a rifle scope, making minute adjustments with the precision of a watchmaker. "Martinez," Chen said, watching her work, "show me what you mean about precision under pressure." Rachel looked up, surprised to see the base commander. "Ma'am, your reports suggest our training methods are flawed. I want to understand why. For the next hour." Rachel walked Colonel Chen through her findings. She showed how speed-focused training created muscle memory that prioritized rapid engagement over careful shot placement. She demonstrated how several rifles had been returned with damage from hasty manipulation, indicating poor fundamentals under time pressure. "The real problem, ma'am," Rachel explained, "is that we're training shooters to perform well on a range with predictable conditions and time limits, but real-world shots don't come with a countdown timer." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "You're saying we're optimizing for the test, not the mission." "Exactly, ma'am." Colonel Chen made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. "I want you to document specific examples, names, performance data, projected real-world impact. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am, but..." Rachel took a breath. "Captain Davis has made it clear that my input isn't welcome. If I continue this analysis,
It might be seen as insubordination." Chen's expression hardened. "Martinez, my job is to ensure this base produces combat-ready personnel."
if our methods are flawed, I need to know. Continue your analysis. You report directly to me now." The change was immediate and dramatic. Within days, Rachel found herself with expanded access to training records, computer systems, and classified performance data. Captain Davis was furious but couldn't openly oppose a direct order from the base commander. Tyler Callahan's reaction was typically crude. "Look who's got friends in high places now," he sneered when he saw Rachel at a briefing. "Still doesn't make you sniper material, janitor." But Rachel was no longer just cleaning rifles. She was analyzing every aspect of the training program, identifying weaknesses that could prove fatal in combat. Her findings painted a disturbing picture. The school was graduating shooters who excelled in controlled conditions but might fail when lives depended on their skills. The breakthrough came when she discovered something in the historical records that changed everything. Buried in the archives was data from previous classes, including performance records from graduates who'd gone on to real combat deployments. The numbers were shocking. Several top performers from Fort Kellen had failed critical shots in actual combat situations. Some had been wounded or killed because their focus on speed over precision had failed them when it mattered most. Rachel compiled this data into a comprehensive report that she titled Precision versus Speed, a Combat Readiness Analysis. It was damning, detailed, and impossible to ignore. But as she prepared to submit her findings, she received an unexpected visitor. A stern-faced major from base security knocked on the armory door. "Martinez, I need you to come with me, Colonel. Chen wants to see you immediately." As Rachel walked across the base, she noticed something unusual. There were more vehicles than normal in the parking area, and she could see additional security personnel at key positions. Something big was about to happen at Fort Kellen, and Rachel's timing couldn't have been worse, or better, depending on how everything played out. The next few days would test everything she'd learned about precision, patience, and the difference between looking good on paper and performing when lives hung in the balance. The test that mattered. General Patricia Morrison arrived at Fort Kellen on a Tuesday morning with an entourage that included Pentagon officials, congressional staffers, and a media crew documenting the military's next-generation sniper program. The visit was meant to showcase the school's innovative training methods and fast-track approach to creating elite marksmen. Rachel watched from the armory window as the convoy rolled through the main gate. She'd spent the past week finalizing her combat readiness report, but Colonel Chen had been mysteriously unavailable for meetings. Now she understood why. The base had been preparing for this high-profile inspection. All personnel not directly involved in the demonstration are to remain at their duty stations, came the announcement over the base PA system. Rachel was definitely not involved in the demonstration. The morning's events unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance. General Morrison observed live-fire exercises where Tyler Callahan and the other top candidates put on an impressive display of rapid target engagement. Their times were exceptional, their confidence obvious. Remarkable improvement in training efficiency, Rachel heard the general comment as the group passed near the armory. "We're producing combat-ready snipers in half the traditional time." What the general didn't see were the details Rachel had documented, the missed shots edited out of the demonstration, the carefully selected weather conditions that minimized wind challenges, the predetermined target distances that played to the candidate's strengths. Around noon, Tyler approached the armory with his usual swagger magnified by the morning's success.
"Hey, janitor," he called out. "You see that shooting? That's what real snipers look like."
Maybe you learned something. Rachel was cleaning his rifle at the time, having noticed a feeding issue that would cause jams under rapid fire. She'd already fixed the problem as she always did. "Your rifle's ready," she said simply, handing it back. Tyler barely glanced at the weapon. "Better be perfect. I've got more demonstrations this afternoon." That afternoon brought the stress test, a simulated combat scenario where candidates had to engage multiple targets under time pressure while dealing with various environmental challenges. Rachel watched from the maintenance bay as smoke machines created visibility issues and speakers blared combat sounds. Through her spotting scope, the one she'd requisitioned for equipment inspection, Rachel observed something the officials couldn't see from their viewing platform. Under the added pressure, the candidate's precision degraded significantly. Tyler, in particular, was struggling. His shots were spreading wider, and she could see him rushing his breathing between engagements. Then something went wrong. One of the smoke generators malfunctioned, creating a much thicker cloud than intended. The wind shifted unexpectedly, carrying the smoke across the range in patterns that hadn't been planned. Suddenly, the controlled demonstration became genuinely challenging. Tyler's rifle jammed. The exact feeding issue Rachel had just fixed should have prevented this, but his rapid manipulation under stress had caused a different problem. She could see him struggling with the weapon, precious seconds ticking away. From her vantage point, Rachel spotted something that made her blood run cold. In the confusion of the unexpected conditions, one of the target systems had malfunctioned. A pop-up target that should have appeared at 300 yards had instead activated at 600 yards, but it wasn't displaying the bright orange training target marker. It looked exactly like a real threat. Rachel grabbed her radio and tried to contact the range control. Static. The communication systems were being jammed as part of the exercise realism. She tried the emergency frequency. Nothing. Through her scope, she watched Tyler acquire the distant target. From his position and angle, he couldn't see that it was a malfunctioned training device. To him, it looked like a legitimate threat that needed immediate engagement. But Rachel could see what he couldn't. There was a maintenance worker beyond the target, just outside the official range area, completely unaware of the unfolding situation. Tyler steadied his rifle, his finger moving to the trigger. At this distance, with his demonstrated accuracy problems under stress, there was a significant chance of a miss that could prove fatal to the innocent worker. Rachel had perhaps 3 seconds to act. She'd spent months being dismissed, mocked, and relegated to support duties. Everyone had told her she wasn't fast enough, wasn't good enough, wasn't sniper material. But in this moment, all of that noise faded away. Rachel grabbed her own rifle, the museum piece everyone had ridiculed, and moved to the window with fluid precision. She had one chance to prevent a tragedy, and it required exactly the kind of shot that speed-focused training couldn't prepare someone for. A precision shot under pressure, where being fast meant nothing, and being right meant everything. The shot heard. Round the base. Time compressed into a single moment of absolute clarity. Rachel's bolt-action rifle came up smooth and natural, the familiar weight settling into her shoulder like it belonged there. Through her scope, she could see Tyler's finger tightening on his trigger, the maintenance worker obliviously checking equipment 50 yards behind the malfunctioned target. No time for a radio call, no time for warnings, just one shot to prevent a tragedy. Rachel's breathing slowed to match her heartbeat. Wind flags at 400 and 600 yards showed a slight crosswind from the left, maybe 3 mpxt, steady. The distance to Tyler's position, 350 yards, angle, slightly downhill. Her notebook calculations flashed through her mind like muscle memory. She aimed, not at Tyler, but at his rifle's receiver, one precise shot to disable his weapon without harming him. It was an impossible target for most shooters, hitting a 6-inch area at 350 yards while the target was moving, but Rachel had been making impossible shots her entire life. The trigger broke cleanly. The crack of her rifle echoed across the demonstration. ranged just as Tyler's weapon sparked and jerked in his hands. His shot went wild, kicking up dirt 20 yards from the malfunctioned target. Tyler stumbled backward, shocked and confused, staring at his suddenly disabled rifle. The silence that followed was deafening. General Morrison and her entourage turned toward the armory, trying to understand what had just happened. Smoke was still drifting across the range, but the exercise had clearly stopped. What the hell was that? Captain Davis barked into his radio. Who fired an unauthorized shot? Rachel set her rifle down and walked out of the armory building. Every eye on the base was now focused on her as she crossed the range toward the demonstration area. Her boots crunched steadily on the gravel, each step deliberate and unhurried. "Ma'am," she said, addressing General Morrison directly. There was a safety hazard. The target system malfunctioned, and there was a civilian in the potential impact area. Tyler was examining his rifle, trying to understand why it had suddenly stopped working. The bullet had struck the receiver perfectly, disabling the firing mechanism without causing an explosion or injury. It was the kind of precision shot that bordered on miraculous. Colonel Chen appeared at Rachel's side, having witnessed everything. From the command post, "General Morrison, this is Specialist Martinez, our senior armorer." The general studied Rachel with new interest. "That was your shot?" "Yes, ma'am. I had a clear line of sight to observe the malfunction and the safety hazard." An aide whispered something in the general's ear, and she nodded. "I want to see the target system malfunction immediately, and I want a full debrief on what just happened." As the investigation unfolded, the truth became clear. The target system had indeed malfunctioned catastrophically. Tyler's shot, if it had been fired, would have had a high probability of missing the intended target and potentially hitting the maintenance worker. Rachel's intervention had prevented what could have been a fatal accident during a high-profile demonstration, but the most shocking revelation came when they examined Tyler's disabled rifle. Rachel's shot had struck with surgical precision, disabling the weapon completely while leaving the shooter unharmed. The margin for error had been virtually non-existent. "Specialist Martinez," General Morrison said, "I need to understand something. How did you make that shot?" Rachel pulled out her worn notebook, opening it to pages of wind calculations and ballistic data. "Ma'am, I've been tracking conditions and performance data for months. I knew the wind, the distance, and the rifle's capabilities, but the target, hitting a moving rifle at that distance. It wasn't about speed, ma'am. It was about precision under pressure." The words hung in the air like an indictment. Everyone present understood the implication. The washout, the janitor, the woman they'd all dismissed had just demonstrated exactly the kind of skill the program claimed to be developing. Tyler finally found his voice, but it came out as barely a whisper. "How did you... that shot was impossible." Rachel looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. It was the only shot that mattered. General Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying Rachel with the calculating gaze of someone reassessing everything she thought she knew. When she finally spoke, her voice carried new authority. "Colonel Chen, I want a complete review of this training program, and I want Specialist Martinez involved in that review." As the group dispersed, Rachel found herself standing alone on the range where her career had supposedly ended months ago. But everything had changed. The woman they'd written off as too slow, too old, too precise, had just demonstrated that sometimes being right was more important than being fast. The real reckoning was just beginning. Vindication, the investigation that followed, lasted 3 days and turned Fort Kellen upside down. General Morrison had ordered a complete audit of the training program, and Rachel found herself at the center of a storm that would reshape military sniper training. In the base conference room, Rachel's combat readiness report was finally getting the attention it deserved. Colonel Chen had provided it to the investigation team, and the data was damning. Charts and graphs covered the walls, showing the gap between range performance and combat effectiveness. "These numbers are troubling," General Morrison said, studying the analysis. "Specialist Martinez, walk me through your findings." Rachel stood at the front of the room, facing the same officials who had been celebrating the program's speed-focused methods just days earlier. Captain Davis sat in the back, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, the core issue is that we're training for artificial conditions," Rachel began, her voice steady. "Range performance under time limits doesn't translate to combat effectiveness when lives are at stake." She clicked through her presentation, showing historical data from previous graduates. These charts show a correlation between speed-focused training and combat failures. Graduates who excelled in timed exercises struggled when facing real-world scenarios that required precision under genuine pressure. Tyler Callahan, sitting in the front row with his arm in a sling, a precautionary measure after the rifle incident, raised his hand. "But ma'am, speed is essential in combat. Hesitation gets people killed." Rachel nodded. "You're right about hesitation. But rushing also gets people killed, often the wrong people. Combat situations require the judgment to know when speed matters and when precision is everything." She turned to the next slide, showing her analysis of the day's demonstration. The target malfunction created exactly the kind of scenario snipers face in the field: unexpected conditions, unclear targets, and innocent lives at risk. The training program's emphasis on rapid engagement nearly caused a tragedy. General Morrison leaned forward. "What are you recommending?" "A fundamental shift in training philosophy, ma'am. We need to teach adaptive precision, the ability to slow down and take the careful shot when the situation demands it, while maintaining the capability for rapid engagement when appropriate." Captain Davis finally spoke up. "General, with respect, Specialist Martinez failed our qualification standards. Her recommendations are based on her inability to meet program requirements." The room fell silent. It was the moment Rachel had been dreading, her failure being used to discredit everything she'd discovered. But General Morrison's response surprised everyone. "Captain Davis, 3 days ago, I watched Specialist Martinez make an impossible precision shot under extreme pressure to prevent a potential fatality. That suggests your qualification standards might be measuring the wrong things." She stood and addressed the room. "I'm implementing immediate changes to this program. First, all current candidates will undergo additional evaluation focusing on precision under stress rather than speed under artificial time limits." Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat as the general continued. "Second, the training curriculum will be redesigned to emphasize adaptive marksmanship, knowing when to shoot fast and when to shoot perfectly. Third, Specialist Martinez will be reinstated as a sniper candidate and will assist in developing the new training protocols." The announcement hit like a thunderbolt. Rachel felt her knees weaken, but she maintained her composure. "Ma'am, I appreciate the confidence, but nothing, Specialist.
You've demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and precision we need our snipers to possess. The question is, are you willing to help us fix this program?" Rachel looked around the room at the faces staring back at her. Some showed respect she'd
never seen before. Others, including Tyler, showed something closer to fear, the realization that their assumptions about skill and qualification were being fundamentally challenged. "Yes, ma'am, I'm willing." Captain Davis requested a private word with General Morrison after the meeting. Rachel couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see Davis's animated gestures and the general's increasingly stern expression. When they finished, Davis approached Rachel directly. "Martinez," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "It seems I owe you an apology. Your methods, your approach. I may have been too quick to judge. It wasn't exactly a heartfelt apology, but coming from Davis, it was significant." Tyler approached her as she was packing up her presentation materials. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by something Rachel had never seen from him before: humility. "That shot you made," he said quietly. "I've been thinking about it. I couldn't have made that shot. Not under that pressure, not with that precision required." Rachel looked at him, seeing perhaps the first crack in his cocky facade. "You could learn to," she said simply, "if you're willing to slow down long enough to understand what really matters." That evening, alone in the armory, Rachel cleaned her rifle one more time. Tomorrow she would return to the range not as support staff, but as both student and instructor in a program she was helping to reshape. The woman they'd called too slow, too old, too precise was about to show them that sometimes the very qualities that seem like weaknesses are actually the greatest strengths of all. Full circle. 6 months later, Rachel Martinez stood at the same firing line where her dreams had seemingly ended, but everything was different now. The range flags flew the same patterns. The Colorado wind still cut through her jacket, but the Fort Kellen Sniper School had been transformed. "Shooters, you have as much time as you need for each engagement," came the announcement over the loudspeaker. "Your score will be based on precision, decision-making, and tactical judgment, not speed." Rachel smiled as she watched the new class of candidates approach their stations. Among them was Tyler Callahan, who had requested to repeat the program under the new curriculum. His cocky swagger had been replaced by focused determination, and his equipment now included a notebook similar to Rachel's, filled with wind data, ballistic calculations, and tactical observations. "Instructor Martinez," Tyler said as he passed her position, "thank you for the ballistic data on today's conditions." "You're welcome, Callahan. Remember, read the wind, trust your training, and take the shot that counts." The transformation hadn't been easy. Some old-school instructors had resisted the changes, and several candidates had washed out when faced with standards that valued judgment over speed. But the results spoke for themselves. Recent graduates were performing significantly better in advanced training and combat deployments. Colonel Chen approached Rachel's observation post. "How are they looking, instructor?" "Better every day, ma'am. They're learning to think instead of just react." The new program, officially renamed the Adaptive Precision Sniper Course, had become a model for military training programs worldwide. Rachel's combat readiness analysis had been published in military journals, and her methods were being studied at the Pentagon. But for Rachel, the real victory was simpler. She watched a young female candidate named Jessica Chen, no relation to the colonel, methodically work through a complex shooting problem. The candidate took her time, calculated wind drift, and delivered a perfect shot at 800 yards. 6 months ago, she would have been failed for taking too long. Today, she was praised for her precision. "Time doesn't matter if you miss the only shot that counts," Rachel had told her students that morning. It had become the unofficial motto of the new program. As the exercise concluded, Rachel noticed something that made her heart swell with quiet pride. On the barracks wall where first shot, fast shot, last shot had once been painted, there was now a new motto: right shot, right time, every time. Tyler Callahan approached her after securing his rifle. His notebook was as thick as Rachel's now, filled with the same meticulous observations she'd been making for years. "Instructor Martinez," he said, "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you my career, maybe my life." Rachel nodded. "You owe me nothing." "Tyler?" You earned your place here by being willing to learn and change. That takes more courage than most people realize. General Morrison had returned to Fort Kellen that week for a follow-up inspection. The transformation she witnessed exceeded all expectations. The new graduates weren't just better shooters, they were better soldiers, capable of making life-and-death decisions under pressure with the kind of judgment that couldn't be rushed. Specialist Martinez, the general said during the closing ceremony, your work here has implications far beyond sniper training. You've demonstrated that sometimes our biggest failures reveal our most important truths. Rachel stood at attention, but inside she felt the quiet satisfaction of vindication. Not the loud, boastful kind, but the deep, lasting satisfaction of knowing she'd been right when it mattered most. That evening, as the sun set behind the Colorado peaks, Rachel found herself alone on the range one final time. She'd been offered a promotion and a transfer to the Pentagon to help implement the new training standards across all military branches. Tomorrow, she would leave Fort Kellen for the last time. She pulled out her notebook, the same worn, leather-bound book that had been mocked and dismissed months earlier. Its pages were now filled with the foundation of a new approach to military training. On the final page, she wrote a single entry. Sometimes the slowest person in the room is the only one who sees what really matters. Speed is a tool. Precision is a principle. And when lives hang in the balance, principles always win. A soft footstep behind her announced someone's approach. Master Sergeant Williams walked up, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Thought you might want this," he said, handing her the package. Inside was a brass nameplate, Chief Instructor Rachel Martinez, Adaptive Precision Training Division. Williams, you changed everything here, Martinez. Not just the program, but the people. That's worth remembering. As Rachel walked back toward the barracks for the last time, she passed the memorial wall where the names of fallen snipers were engraved in black granite. She paused, thinking of all the lives that might be saved by soldiers trained to value precision over speed, judgment over reaction. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mom, this is Lieutenant Sarah Chen, recent graduate
of your program. Wanted you to know I made a critical shot in Afghanistan last week. Took my time, read the wind, and saved 3 civilians. Thank you for teaching me that the right shot is always worth waiting for." Rachel smiled and put the phone
away. She'd been called a clerical error in boots, a ghost who'd wandered out of admin, a janitor with a scope. They'd all been wrong about what those labels meant. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is exactly the person everyone needs. Sometimes the one who moves too slowly is the only one moving in the right direction. And sometimes, just sometimes, being different isn't a weakness. It's the very strength the world has been waiting for. As she reached the barracks, Rachel turned for one last look at the range where her journey had begun. In the fading light, she could see tomorrow's candidates setting up their equipment, preparing for a program that would teach them something the old school never could. That precision isn't about being perfect under artificial conditions, it's about being right when everything depends on it. The woman they'd tried to wash out had ended up washing out an entire system of thinking. And in its place, she'd built something better, a program that honored both speed and precision, but never confused one for the other. Rachel Martinez walked into the barracks carrying her worn rifle case and her thick notebook, no longer the misfit in boots, but the architect of a revolution. She'd proven that sometimes the most important victories don't announce themselves with fanfare. They whisper their truth in the silence between heartbeats, in the space between breathing in and letting go, in that perfect moment when everything aligns, and the only shot that matters finds its mark. The range would remember her long after she was gone. But more importantly, every sniper trained in her methods would carry a piece of her wisdom forward, that rushing to the finish line means nothing if you're running in the wrong direction, and that the courage to slow down in a fast world might just be the bravest thing of all. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing
Viewers around the world.